Hello again, everyone. So we are going to talk about something a little different than the last session. We are going to be talking about millennials who are everywhere, also in the workplace, also starting their businesses, also you cannot stop hearing about them. So Patricia, I want you to start mostly to settle a dispute between my brother and I. He says that he is not a millennial. I say that he absolutely is. What is the group that comprises millennials?
How old is he?
He is 32, will be 33 in January.
Ooh.
No, don't do this.
He might have missed the cut. You know, there's no real hard and fast to this. It's only the boomers, my group, that actually have a designation that even the Census Bureau uses. So the millennials currently are 21. He's at the upper end. We'll give it to 35. How about that?
Great. We will call him an old millennial, which is
millennial. There you go. There you go.
Fantastic. So you do a lot of research around the millennial group. How big are they? What are they doing in the workplace? How are they different than the boomers or Gen X?
Well, currently they're 60. That can't be me. I don't have any cell phones on me. Currently, they're about 66 million strong. And recently, millennials passed boomers because poor Gen Xers never quite got the size, but as the largest component in the labor force. So now they're the dominant players in the labor force. What's most interesting about millennials is the time period where they became of age. Think 2007, things were really, really rough. So a lot of what determines how millennials behave is actually more a function of when they became of age during the recession, because it took a lot longer for a lot of these kids to get their first job. This is why they were living at home longer, not because they love mom and dad, but it was a really hard period. And the other thing that distinguishes them from prior generations is the amount of student loan debt a large number of them are coming out with. But other than that, a lot of the trends you see are sort of like trends. They're behaving like younger people, a prior generation, but these two factors totally set them apart.
Okay. Natalie, I want to come to you. You work with a lot of millennials, correct? You have started a Millennial Week. Can you first tell us a little bit about that, and then also tell me if some of the things that Patricia just said ring true to you when it comes to the people you work with?
Sure. So I think, as everyone can kind of agree, you can't turn on a television or open a newspaper without hearing something about millennials. Everything from who we're voting for to who we didn't vote for, to how often we're starting businesses, unemployment rates. And what we found was that while a lot of that conversation was coming from commentators and pollsters who weren't millennials, we didn't see quite as much of that dialogue being generated by millennials themselves. So we launched Millennial Week in 2013 to really engage the demographic in three key areas, those being entrepreneurship, civic engagement, and career development. And so I think most of our programming is really steered towards engaging millennials in those areas. So it's talking about everything from a lot of the topics that have already been covered today, such as raising capital for your small business, to what does the millennial impact on civic engagement and politics and progressiveness look like. And I agree definitely with a lot of the points that she made. I think that what is a millennial, what a millennial is largely defined by technology, being dubbed the digital natives. There's, of course, the overwhelming focus on technology. And of course, student loan debt. I think those are all issues that most of our attendees are pretty concerned with, issues such as technology, innovation, how all of that impacts entrepreneurship.
Shizu, we just talked a little bit about entrepreneurs,
Sure.
So obviously that's where you come in.
Great.
So I think when we talk about millennials, as Patricia was saying, there are stereotypes and there's some data to back it up that they are living at home, that they are not working, that they are very far behind. And then we hear about people who have started their own businesses and are ostensibly employing other millennials. So
Sure.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the challenges that you faced as a millennial that are kind of on trend, but some of the things that you've been able to do that kind of fly in the face of, I guess, what people would expect?
Sure. So our business started in 2014, officially full-time. We were both working at the World Bank. My business partner and I met at Goldman Sachs in 2010 when we were doing investment banking. And that's where we met, so we have a fundamental trust. And then at the point where we decided to start this business, which funny enough the thought was started at a cupcake shop. And we were like, oh, there's no healthy options to detox right after we just ate this cupcake. So where do we go from here? And so we started buying our own juicers. And I think that story resonates with a lot of people where we're also just so busy and pressed for time. And so we brought the fresh pressed solution for the life pressed people. And so millennials and our staff is 100% minority, but also 100% millennial. And so I believe that millennials definitely follow this vision and want to believe in something and do good, feel good, and look good.
Yeah.
So
I think another one of the things that we hear a lot about millennials is that they aren't as brand and company loyal as their parents were, maybe even as the Gen Xers were, that they kind of hop around from place to place. Patricia, I'm wondering if there is data that supports that, and then also, is there a good reason for that?
Well, the biggest hopping around that people generally talk about is with jobs. And there, the data is actually interesting because if you go back to 2005, young people were changing jobs at a pretty high rate. The economy was really good. You go to 2007, there was a lot less job hopping in all age groups because things were going so poorly. It's edged back up, but it's not as high as it was in 2005. So the concept of millennials as irresponsible employees is really, a myth. Young people change jobs more often than older people. Fact of life. So when you're thinking about trends that drive millennials, it's really important to separate what makes this group different versus how are they behaving like young people in prior generations. Some areas there is a big switch. You're seeing a lot less credit card debt. Part of this, again, is a holdover from the recession. It's declined in all age groups, but particularly for the 35 and under crowd. So, when you're thinking about how the millennials are thinking about purchases, they're much more likely to be living closer to inside their means, not taking on the type of debt that you saw in previous groups of younger people.
Shizu, on the question of loyalty, I want you to come at this from two perspectives.
Sure.
So one, how do you retain your millennial employees? And also, how do you retain millennial customers? Are you finding a decent amount of brand loyalty there?
I thought you were going to ask me why I quit my job.
No.
I was like, oh boy, I'm not ready for this.
No,
I'm
no.
kidding. So I think on the retention front, we make it very easy and we say work smart, not work long. So you can wear whatever you want. If it's athleisure, fine. If you want to wear runners, I wear runners every single day. You can wear whatever you want. So it's so much more of get your job done, not so much as you need to FaceTime and feel, there's no micromanaging. There's no time for micromanaging. And everyone is committed to make their best efforts to fulfill their job and see the impact that they can make in a day. People want to see results and really see that they're creating something. So I think that's on the first thing. Remind me the second.
So how do you deal with retaining millennials as customers as well?
So on the customer front, we have a very high return rate, and I think that's great to our staff as well as our product. The product is good, and I think that's where it starts is product and people. And so I think on that front, if you can focus on your own and not get out of, I think if you just focus on what created the business in the first place, you'll naturally have people that will continue to stick by you. And we always build loyalty through social media and getting their feedback. Say, hey, we want to open in Clarendon. What do you guys think? Comment. Okay, great, we will. Yay.
Yeah. Natalie, can you talk a little bit about when you deal with millennials, when you host Millennial Week, what is it that they're most interested in? You mentioned that the people you deal with, they fall into 3 different categories. Are they especially interested in entrepreneurship, being their own boss? Are they especially interested in giving back, civic engagement? What is that?
I think it's a combination, to be quite honest with you, and I think that's one of the things that distinguishes this generation from boomers. particularly with entrepreneurship. So depending on what study you look at, millennials are launching businesses at an earlier age and at twice the rate as that boomers did. But it's not as clear cut in terms of what the interest is. So you've got 48% of millennials that want to launch a business of some type, but what we're also seeing is that there's also the push for incorporating some type of a social good in that. So it's not just, we work with like a lot of for-profits. We get a lot of interest from millennials that are starting for-profit businesses, but a lot of for-profits for good that are trying to affect real social change through entrepreneurship. So I don't necessarily think that the lines are quite as clear with millennials. Definitely wanting to start businesses, but most that we talk to and that we've had a chance to engage with in DC and then now Denver and Seattle are looking to still incorporate, whether it's an app or some type of a tech-driven businesses or some type of a consumer product good, they're looking to incorporate some type of social good component through their business.
Patricia, do you agree with that? Do you think that what drives millennials is in any way different than what drove boomers, or do you think that the generation is still too young to tell?
I think it's a combination of things going on here. I think there's a group of people who are naturally entrepreneurial. And those people are going to seek out opportunities. I think technology, in a lot of ways, has made the path easier because I think you can start at a different scale than with some other businesses that you can think of that were started, way back when. But there's also a group in this age group that really wants a stable job. I mean, they've seen what happened between 2007, and it didn't even end in 2009. It took a long time to dig out of that hole. And they're concerned about, I want a job with stability, particularly if you're reaching the point where you're starting a family. You want to, have a job that's got leave, a job that's got the health care. So it's not, we make a mistake sometimes because we put a label on things. We think the underlying is this giant homogeneous group. It's not. So there are a bunch of different aspects to it that you can't simplify with saying this is an entrepreneurial generation. I think there's probably, because of the scale and the technology issues, I think there's more room to run with it. I think it's because of press stories, it's out there, so it occurs to younger people, hey, I don't need to find a job, I can build a job. But don't lump everybody in because there's still that group that want a more traditional type job.
To the point about stability, and also when we talk about the fact that the millennial generation is comprised of a whole bunch of folks in a whole bunch of different age sets, a lot of millennials are kind of hitting that inflection point where they are ready for leadership challenges. And I'm wondering, do you have any sense of how millennials are doing when it comes to actually moving up the ladder at some of these more stable jobs?
I think young people traditionally, you start a job, it's like, I can figure it out, I can do that better, I should be running this place, you don't have the right ideas. I think the good managers and the good companies are figuring ways to harness their workforce of whatever age. I think the companies that are struggling are those that are committed to more of a command and control. Because people, of all ages really want to feel that sense of contribution. And, millennials, maybe it's, I wasn't a helicopter parent, but I hear there's some in my group that were out there. In some ways, you've got a group of people that all through their growing up years have been told, you're great, you're marvelous, you're fantastic. And then they hit the workforce and all of a sudden it's like, sit down and shut up and do your job. So, I think there's there's just so many different parts out there.
Shizu, you talked a little bit earlier about, the fact that you can go to work wearing sneakers and, you're kind of your own boss. I'm wondering, we hear a lot about young millennials who have made their own way and who are their own bosses. How do you think the culture of entrepreneurship has changed? Do you think it's changed from past generations?
I mean, it's the first time I've worn heels in probably a year. Isn't that crazy? I think in terms of entrepreneurship changing, I think we have to be a lot more creative. Things change a lot quicker than I would have liked or at least have assumed. The generation changes so quickly. You have to adapt or you will fail. And something that we think a lot about, or I think a lot about and tell our team is, hey, this is our customer right now between 25 to 35, which is 80% of our customers, is not thinking about new products or services that match where they are today, but where they will be in 5 years. How do we envision what 5 years is going to be and bring that back today so that we can innovate and create what we want our ideal customer to become? So I think we have to be extra creative, and creativity is what you should pay for versus set tasks and talents, because I think the market changes very, very quickly. Yeah.
So I want you and Natalie to both weigh in on this next idea. And to that point, how are millennial consumers different? Or what do you see in millennial consumers that they want, that they are interested in? You know, I think you mentioned this a little bit before when you talked about wanting to look good, wanting to feel good. And when we think about a lot of kind of the trend products or things that are doing really well, Soul Cycle, things like that, what do you think millennials want as consumers?
I think it's a tough question, because I think sort of honing back into some of the points we've made earlier is that you're talking about a massive generation that's very diverse. And so kind of honing in on what one particular segment may want over another is a little difficult. But I think I still circle back to overwhelmingly, we see an interest in millennials that are looking to patronize businesses that have some sort of a social good component, where they feel as though they can give back by patronizing or supporting a particular business. So I still feel that social good is still one that a lot of millennials are still honing in on. And it gets kind of exciting for them if they can say, well, if I shop at this business, there's an opportunity to sort of give back by doing so.
I think on the social good, I mean, you know, with JRINK, we don't have blatantly saying this is our social good. I think by nature and by default, we have a minority business and we are employing people. And I think job growth continues to be, in our mind, the biggest way we give back. But I think, you know, yesterday we had our team meeting and we're talking about our mission and our value statement. And we said, why not GMO? Why do we care so much about non-GMO products? But the question goes more to saying, what do we trust and what do we not trust? And I think with millennials and customers, they want to trust something. Social media, they want to comment and hear right back from you 5 minutes later that they will be responded to. They want to feel part of a growth and like vested into a business or brand. So I think that's very important.
Patricia, I want to come back to you. We talked a little bit in a previous panel about regulation and how things will change under the new administration. Obviously, we don't know anything that is super concrete. But one of the things that President-elect Trump has said that he wants to do is kind of ease some of the terms on business so that more businesses can get started, so that more businesses can thrive. I'm wondering if you think that will have any impact on the way millennials start their own businesses.
You know, this is hard. What can I say in public? The detail around many of the proposals is so sadly lacking. I'm really not sure what they mean about barriers to starting your own business. I think that, you know, that's everything from, you know, food safety rules, which I think you would think are important and your customers probably think are really important, to other types of health and safety. Is he talking about those types of rollback where I think you would see most people, particularly younger people, when you're talking about social conscience, really worrying about how do I know, you know, what the circumstances are these people are employed in. So deregulation, kind of like cutting waste, fraud, and abuse in government, sound really ducky. But when you try to implement the actual policies, you know, it's really hard, and you have a whole host of unintended consequences. So it's too soon to tell because there's no specificity to these things.
Shizu, to put kind of a face on some of the challenges people face when they're starting their own businesses, especially when they are young, starting out, what were some of the challenges that you faced, or what was something that ended up being difficult that you were surprised about, that you didn't even think of?
I mean, we're finance people. We know Excel sheets and like ROI, but actually pressing and cutting apples and delivering every day, that's what our life for 6 months is. When do you take the step to hire someone? How do you retain and how do you, I think the retention piece will always be on everyone's mind, no matter what generation. It's what do people care about and really taking the time to ask them. And that will vary based on people. But I think being leaders is not necessarily at 27, 28, when we started 24, obvious to most people is how to be a good leader. How do you manage and mentor people along the way while trying to do QuickBooks and like accounting and pay my taxes? So I think it's being able to dual track and work smart as an entrepreneur yourself.
Right.
Yeah, and also learn to delegate.
All right. I have one more question, Natalie. It's going to you. So, as you said, there are a lot of people who are out there who are maybe having a difficult time finding work or finding something that they're passionate about. They're, maybe seeing all of these articles about people who are stuck at home. You talk to a lot of millennials. What is the thing that you would say to that person about trying to find the job that they're passionate about or trying to find something to do that really sets them on the trajectory for a career versus just a job?
Sure. So if you're speaking just towards those who aren't necessarily interested in entrepreneurship, but more so career development, I definitely say mentorship. One is just kind of perseverance. Of course, unemployment is a big piece for us that we sort of tackle through all of our events across the country and kind of engaging millennials on what their concerns are about that. So there's the perseverance in trying to get into the job market. But a big one is still mentorship. Once you land a position, maybe being able to mentor and sort of partner with someone who's a little bit further along the way to kind of mentor you throughout, sort of career development and kind of growing and sort of climbing the ladder along the way.
I can't thank you guys enough for being here and chatting with me. Audience, please join me in thanking our panel.